Welcome to the Phoenix Conversations, second chances, fresh starts, and powerful new chapters. I'm Lucy McCarraher, author, speaker, and publisher, and each week I talk to men and women who've lived through turning points and come out brighter on the other side. Whether this is the first time you've listened to this podcast or you're a regular listener, if you haven't already, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit follow and subscribe. Today, I'm talking to Patty Azzarello, an author, speaker, and business advisor. Her latest book, Why Is She Still Here? My Ungraceful Journey from the Playground to the Boardroom, is out now. It is a sharp, funny, behind-the-scenes look at building a high-powered career while quietly panicking on the inside. Patty Azzarello became the youngest general manager at Hewlett-Packard at age 33, ran a billion-dollar software business at 35, and became a CEO at 38. She is the founder of the Azzarello Group, which works with CEOs and leadership teams across many industries to help their businesses and people get better at what they do. Hello, Patty. How are you? It's lovely to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me on the Phoenix Conversations.
It's wonderful to be here, and hello, everyone.
Thank you so much. So, Patty, I'm talking to you partly because I know that you've got a new book coming out with a wonderful title that we'll get to in due course. But what I'd like to do is start at the very beginning. You've had a remarkable life, a remarkable career. But what were you like as a child? What was Patty the little girl like, and where did you grow up? What kind of environment were you in? Give us a snapshot of who you were when you were young.
So I grew up in the middle of nowhere. I grew up in a very small town, farm adjacent in New Jersey, and it was just a place where nothing happened. And I just always had this craving for like something exotic or interesting to be happening in my life. And it just was not there. But in terms of my childhood, I kind of feel like my childhood was a paradox of growing up in two worlds. So at home, I had the most amazing family. Like I won the lottery with my parents and my sister. My home was so safe and loving and full of laughter, and there was no drama. It was like wonderfully dull at home. And that was my happy place. In contrast, the world outside of my home was not a happy place for me. When I started kindergarten, I was so enthusiastic to start school. I was just like, I could not wait. And my heart was open and I was so full of motivation and enthusiasm. And I encountered a bully. And that bully was like this amazing little mini Machiavelli who decided she just had me in her target. And for 7 years, it was unrelenting. And her whole thing was to get people to hate me. That was her agenda. And, when I was a kid, I was fat, I was smart, I was a nerd. I wasn't bullied for any of those things. I was bullied specifically for being Patty. And so I would go to school every day and somebody would say like, "Ew, I hate you. I hate you, Patty. Don't you know that everybody hates you? You're disgusting. You're not allowed to be near us." Like that was my life outside of home. And she ran that campaign for 7 years, which is just kind of amazing to step back and think about that. And so the world was just a scary, horrible place for me. And I would go home from school and I would curl up with my mom and we'd have these very deep, mature conversations about why people are mean. And I just became very uncomfortable out in the world. But thankfully, I had this wonderful home to go back, and every day I could rebuild and I could. The other kind of big thing that happened to me as a child, and both of these are good source material for these Phoenix moments that we're here to talk about. I was sent home from school with a diagnosis from the school nurse who spent 10 seconds in an evaluation saying that I had scoliosis. And nobody thought it was a big deal, but then my parents noticed I was kind of walking a little bit funny. Long story short, we end up at a hotshot orthopedist office in New York, and he told me, I was 10 years old, he told me without a lot of information that I had a vertebrae out of alignment in my spine. It wasn't just scoliosis, and that any sort of fall or bump would paralyze me for the rest of my life.
How
And so
terrifying. That must have been
yeah,
awful.
like how do you take that on as a 10-year-old? So my parents, God bless them, we got a million second opinions. And I avoided a massive surgery that would have put me in a body cast for a year, which was on the books. Like, I'm thinking everybody already hates me. Now I'm going to be an outcast in a body cast. Like, how am I going to fit that into my life? It was, it was terrifying, but I think it's one of those things that was kind of the emotion of that, just sort of, what do you call that? Disassociation, right? I have a lot of trouble really remembering that emotion, but I knew that it was bad, and thankfully I avoided that. But what happened was that not only was the world scary emotionally for me, the world was scary physically for me. Like, if I fall down, I'm going to be paralyzed. And, that's one of those things I still kind of carry with me today. I can be very nervous on my feet physically in the world. So again, home safe, world scary, and I live in this incredibly boring place, and I need to get out of here. I need to find a way to do something. So one of my, probably my first big Phoenix moment came when I was a child. The Italian side of my family used to have these amazing, epic picnics on the weekends. And I was the youngest in my family by a mile. So my sister was older and everybody else was adults as far as I was concerned. And I just remember one day I'm sitting in the grass and I'm working on a book report. And I just watch all the cars drive up and the adults are unloading all the coolers, all the food, a grill, and a stove. The Italians would bring a stove to the picnic so they could cook pasta at the picnics. And it was like just this constant, like this work. And then when all this stuff was in place, all the men went and played ball, and all the women started unpacking the coolers and cooking and prepping and cooking and planning and serving and then cleaning and then repeat and do that again. And the women did that all day. And the men were either playing ball or laying in the sun drinking. And I remember all day, I'm looking at the women, the men, the women, the men, the women. And I just had this like lightning bolt of a thought. I was looking at the men and I thought, that's the one that I want. Like, if this is the choice of what an adult gets to do, I want that, which is not the wild, discontinuous thought it might sound like, having no female role models at the time to show me a different kind of life. But in that moment, I got this lightning bolt of, I am a person. It's not that I'm a girl or a boy. I am a person. And those women are people, and those men are people. And there's no reason at all that I cannot choose what the men are doing and choose those men as my role model. That's what I want to do. And the reason that was not weird or not such a big leap is because of my mom. My mom, and as you'll read in the book, my mom was just an amazing person in so many ways. But from as long as I can remember, she said, Patty, you will grow up, you are going to go to college, you're going to get a good education, you're going to get a good job, and you're going to support yourself. That is your job. Don't expect a man to support you. Don't expect anyone to support you. That is your job. And so with my mom's encouragement and my inspiration about what life could look like, I decided I'm going to go off and pursue that. But I didn't know how to do that when I was 5 or 10. Like, I didn't know what that meant. But what I thought was connected was be a good student. Like, do well at school and go to college, and that's going to be your on-ramp. So then that sent me onto a path of, the be a super student as a matter of life or death.
That's an amazing childhood story, and it sounds like you really have had to reinvent yourself as a person in your childhood? Partly, I mean, to deal with the bullying, you must have gained a kind of, a kind of protective layer that most children don't actually acquire till later. And then again, that fear, that physical fear of thinking that, a fall could paralyze you. That's absolutely terrifying. But I love the story of you choosing to be in the men's camp, because that's just more interesting and more fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that's wonderful. So as a reinvented kind of post school, post college kind of person, where did that take you then?
At college, I was registered as a fine arts major because I loved arts. I was always drawing and coloring and singing and, anything except dancing because of the back issues. I was very awkward. That was never going to be part of my life. But my mom's voice was in my head saying, you're going to get a good job and you're going to support yourself. And I literally scribbled out fine arts at college orientation and penciled in electronic engineering. And I ended up with an electronic engineering and computer science degree. I did a double major. And then I entered the workforce as an engineer. And I hated being an engineer, and I migrated myself into marketing positions first, and then ultimately business and business leadership positions.
Oh, so it sounds like you sort of reinvented yourself from somebody who was really an arts person, a humanities person, into an engineer for the purposes of getting that good job. What was the first job that you had?
My first real job was a student intern, a student engineering intern. Was the only girl. All the other interns were men. Everyone was older than me because I started college at 16. Because I hated, I had to get away from my childhood. So I used my super student path to just get the hell out of there. And I started college at 16. So I was in this intern job. I was young. I was female. All the other interns were men. All the people that worked there, all the engineers were men. I remember so clearly, I would walk into a room and they'd all be having a conversation. And as I'd walk in, they'd like look at my boobs and then go back to their conversation and then ignore the fact that I was in the room. And I was just one day, a few days in, I was watching this conversation and I thought, Patty, this is where everything happens. These conversations are where the work happens, where the business happens, where everything in this job and happens, where everything in every job in your career happens and everything in the world happens. And you are not in these conversations. Like, you need to be in these conversations. And in that moment, I just decided this shy, awkward, bullied, waiting for people to like me and invite me was not serving me. Like, I had to just say, yep, that happened. And as paralyzing and terrifying as it was to break into that conversation circle of men, I just decided I need to do it. So I shoved my way into that circle and they were surprised. Like, what are you doing here? You've never been part of these conversations before. We didn't invite you. Why are you here? Right. And I didn't know what was going to happen. And I listened. I just listened. And they talked about all kinds of things and I didn't have anything to contribute. But what I learned was there's a tremendous value in just getting yourself in the door, in the room, in the conversation, and just listening. Because I was able to make connections and develop insights and ideas that nobody else was developing because they were doing all the talking. And I was the one putting all the pieces together. And I was able to parlay those insights into volunteering for opportunities, into putting myself forward. And I finally, I got some doors open that way. And that moment, that Phoenix moment, as you call it, I love that, happened to me again when I was an executive at Hewlett-Packard. And that was how I took that insight of wedging my way into the conversation circle, not just in my first job, but when I got into my first big executive job. And I had the very same feeling. Like, there were all these scary conversation circles of men. They were ignoring me. I was terrified. And I thought, I got to get myself in there. And I did the same thing. I just shoved myself in those circles and listened as though my life depended on it. And that's like a secret passageway. If you just are a really good listener, you'll find threads to pull on and things to connect and opportunities to create. So that was the way I overcame my, I don't know that I overcame it. I just kind of forced my way through it and saying this shy, awkward thing just is not serving you. You got to get in the conversation.
Well, whatever you did, you certainly did something right, quite a lot of things right, because you became the youngest general manager at Hewlett-Packard at the age of 33. Do you put that down to you having pushed your way into those conversations, those arenas that men were in?
I mean, that's certainly a big part of it. It helped that I was super competent and I would do well at my jobs and deliver good work. But I got to tell you, that wasn't what the breakthroughs come from. That's a lot of people, and particularly women, make the mistake of thinking working really hard and doing an excellent job of everything that's asked of you is what gets you promoted. It does not. I had another Phoenix moment in my career in this regard where my first really big job, I did in a year a remarkable amount of things. The results I achieved in a year blew away everybody's expectations for what somebody was supposed to be able to do in a year. And I was excited about that. And I went to go talk to my boss about getting my raise. It was a performance time for the performance conversation. And he's like, Patty, this was extraordinary. Thank you. I can't believe what you've accomplished. I'm like, well, what's my raise? And he said, I'm sorry, but there is no raise. And I'm like, what? And it was a generous year. It wasn't like there was no money. It was a generous year for raises. And I got 0. And he said, I really tried, but nobody knows you. And I was like, what? Well, like, what does that have to do with anything? It just, my brain could not even take that on board. And what I learned in that moment is it was not just his voice that had a say in my raise and my performance review. It was a committee of voices, and no one on the committee knew who I was. And that was so much more important, apparently, than my outstanding work. And that blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind. So then what he did, my boss was really very good to me. He gave me a list of about 15 executives across the company, and he just said, go meet these people. And I'm like, well, how many things are wrong with this idea? I'm still on the inside, this awkward introvert. Now you give me a list of 15 executives' names and I'm supposed to go meet them without a topic, any particular thing to talk about. Another time I thought I was going to die, but I started doing that. And some of those meetings were horrifically awkward, but some of them were good. And one of them was kind of fun. And this is another story in the book of how I parlayed this one conversation into someone becoming a mentor for me. And that mentor opened a door to a giant career jump that I never would have seen that job. I never would have self-identified to go for that job. The hiring manager would never have considered me for that job if it wasn't the mentor that said, you must talk to Patty Azzarello. You don't have to hire her, but you have to interview her. And those were the moments that let me get to those places that you mentioned, being the youngest general manager, running a large software business at 35. And every one of those breakthroughs, I had the help of a mentor. And I will say that all of my mentors were men. There are good ones out there, and the people who have the power, you need to connect with those people because they give you access. You need mentoring and you need access. And by me forcing my way into conversations and getting over myself and making myself go meet these people, that was how I got those doors to open. And then I kept doing remarkable work.
But it's not just about the mentors. It's about you getting into those situations. It's about you attracting those mentors and kind of forcing them to work with you almost, it sounds like. What do you put it down to that you were able to do this when so many women just find it impossible to get into those rooms, to get past those doors? What piece of advice do you have for women in really concrete terms? What do we need to do to knock those doors down, to open those rooms up?
Yeah, it's don't be afraid to ask for help. So many people are afraid to ask for help because they think it makes you look weak. For me, it was quite the opposite. I would I would I would ask any smart person for help that I could find. And quite the contrary, when you ask somebody, a big scary executive who's brilliant, you ask them for help, they give you advice, and then you go do the thing. Their reaction is not, "Oh, poor Patty, poor thing, she's so incompetent, she had to ask for my help." They're like, "Oh, yeah, I gave her some ideas and wow, look at her go." Like it only built my credibility. So I think the one very practical thing that we all need to realize is that nobody can really do anything without help. The amount that you can do on your own is not going to get you to become a general manager at 33. I had help. I worked hard, but I had help. And I just got very, very used to asking for help. And the other thing, like I will tell you, the other thing that blocks a lot of people, and I'm not immune to, is just defeating your internal critic, the one that keeps so many people from being able to go do those things and have those conversations. And I can tell you, I almost didn't show up for the biggest breakthrough of my career because I had disqualified myself because my internal critic is saying, "Are you kidding me? You're not ready for this. You're too young to have the job you already have, and you're going to go for this big running $1 billion software business. That's insane. You're not qualified. You need to wait." And I think that's the thing that so many of us get into is we just wait until we're not scared, until we feel qualified on 100% of the items that are necessary. What my Phoenix moment here was an intervention of my mentors that were like, "Your name's not on the list. Why haven't you put yourself forward for this job?" And I started with, "Oh, who? Little old me? Like, I'm not ready. That job would be amazing, but I'm not ready for that job." And they're like, "Patty, get your name on this list." And they showed me the list of other people, and it was all men. And a lot of them had way less experience than I did. And I was just like, wow, like if they're not embarrassed to interview for this job, then I need to do it. And that was another one of those moments where scared does not mean you're disqualified. And so I got myself into that interview, and I had a lot of different experiences. And as a business leader, because I had my engineering degree, I had, a lot to offer to interview for technology business leader jobs. But this one, I didn't have any experience in the technology itself. And I got into the interview, and the hiring manager was sitting across the desk from me, and he said, "Okay, Patty, so as I can see here on your resume, you have absolutely no experience in network management. This is a network management business. Why are you here?" And in that moment, I had a choice to make. I could let my internal critic take over and get scared and defensive and start trying to justify something about that, or I could just lean forward and be brave and say what was on my mind and focus on not what I was lacking, but what my strengths were. And that's another big issue and theme in my journey is focusing on strengths. So I took a breath and I said to this scary executive, "You already have 3,000 people in this business who are network management experts. You don't need another one. What you need is me, because your business is losing market share in a growing market, and that's not okay. You have a problem with your strategy. You have a problem with your organization. You have internal competition in this business. You're losing, and those are the things I know how to fix, and that's why you need me." And I entered that interview and I was like, "Oh my God, what did I just do?" And I literally went into the ladies' room and hid for about a half an hour. Like that was a really big swing and it was terrifying, but I did it and I got the job.
So how quickly did you find out after that moment, after that hideout in the loo? Did they tell you
It was
immediately or did you have to wait?
No, it was probably a week at least, a week or two. But I think here's an answer to the kind of underneath question that you were asking me about. Why was I able to do these things? Where did I summon this? Um, and one of the characters in my book is actually little Patty. And I look back to little Patty over and over again. And she was brave enough to go back to school every day. And she was little, right? I was an adult now. And it wasn't just like a writing device for the book. This is very true in my life and in my heart. As I look back, and it's like, man, what she went through in going back to school every day, facing that and focusing on excellence and being a good student. If she can do it, I can do it. And so I just developed this ability to do things that were scary, particularly things that were scary socially, because little Patty had to be so brave.
I think that's a wonderful answer, actually. I find the sort of questions that people ask frequently, what advice would you give to your younger self? I find those very kind of trite and annoying, actually. But what I really like what you're saying, what would she tell me? That's
Right.
that's much more relevant and much more interesting. So that's wonderful that you got that job. And what happened? I want to know what happened in the job as well. Did you find that there were more kind of battles and pushback against you as a woman and not being the expert in the field to overcome? Or did that break everything open and you were kind of fine once you got there?
Uh, Some of both. Some of both. I One of my leadership approaches is to just really talk to people and be a very good listener and not just order people around, but say, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? And so I spent the first couple months of that job just listening. I traveled all over the world. I met people and I listened. And that bought me a lot of grace. So if people thought I didn't know what I was doing when I walked in the door, they were right. But the fact that I did all of that very thoughtful listening, I scored a lot of credibility points by doing that. And I said, I'm not answering any questions until we get through this period and we start a business planning exercise. Then I'll answer questions about the strategy. Right now I'm just listening. So that helped a lot. And people liked having me as their leader because my philosophy is to delegate a lot and make people feel like superheroes and support them in their own careers. And so the pushback on me from my team was not bad because of those things. I think I managed that in a way that was good for everybody. But out in the world, yes, I did get some pushback. I remember where I was only 3 weeks into the job and we were having our global customer and partner event. And I had to get up on the stage and be the leader for the whole world of my extended team, the partners, customers, like, what is our new leader going to say to us? And that was one of the more terrifying moments in that job. I survived it. But after that, I ended up in a press conference. Like right after I got off the stage, I ended up in a press conference and a journalist from Romania just looked at me and he said, so does HP have a policy of hiring young, attractive women into important positions? And like, I was so taken aback by that. And I didn't crumble, but I didn't handle it well. I just said, I don't remember what I said, but I said, that's not a question that's relevant here. I said something. I can tell you, I've answered that question for the rest of my life. Like, I have so many good comebacks to that question now. But there was a fair amount of that. And then, like, throughout the world, I'd be taken into customer situations, and there'd be like grizzly older men, and I'd walk in, and they would just treat me like a little girl, and I'd have to constantly earn my right to be in the room. And that was actually a theme through my entire career. There was always the need to do that. There was another situation where a partner organization wanted to have an executive meeting with my organization, and it was me sitting across from the CEO, and I had 2 guys flanking me and he had 2 guys flanking him. And I was by far the most senior person because his organization was very small compared to mine. And he would not make eye contact with me, address a question to me, listen to every time I answered a question, even though I was talking, I'd have to like talk to his ear and then he'd ask one of my people a question and they said, that's really a question for Patty. And then it was like, there were lots of those moments, and you just have to, you know, my philosophy there was that was how the world was wired when I was coming up. And it was just part of it to navigate that stuff.
Well, you seem remarkably good-humoured about it all now, I must say. So, Patty, I want to ask you about whether becoming an author made a difference to how people perceive you. Because I always feel that, when you write your first book and you become an author for the first time, it is a kind of reinvention, both in for what you feel about yourself and also how the world sees you. And I wonder if that's true for you. When did you write your first book, and what was it?
Yeah, my first book came out about 15 years ago. It was called Rise, and it was about personal effectiveness and personal leadership and standing out as a leader and while liking your life. And that book, I would say that book wasn't that much of a reinvention for me because I had been writing a very popular blog for a long time, just about lessons learned. And that's what that book is. I just collected that all into a book. And that book is still selling wildly well, which is fascinating this many years later. My second book was a similar themed book that's called Move, and that's about how decisive leaders execute strategy despite obstacles, setbacks, and stalls. And that one is targeted more at organizational leadership. But those books weren't personal. They were like, I figured out how to do this. I have very clear thoughts about how to do this. I've written it down. I want you to know the answers. That's what those books were. Where my current book right here, Why Is She Still Here?
Fantastic, such a
That
good
one
title.
changed. Yes, that one changed me. That one, I learned so much about myself, and particularly when I look at all of the things I've struggled with, all the things that I've felt awkward or things I've been embarrassed that I should be more capable at that or whatever. Once I got to the end of this book, I'm like, oh, now I know who I am. I'm okay.
It's a wonderful book. It's got incredible stories in it. And I think it will speak to many, many women in particular, but also men as well. So I really, really want to congratulate you on the book. It's fabulous.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Patty, can we just finish off with a question about anybody who might be listening, might be a man, might be a woman, who is kind of standing on the edge of change, potential reinvention, or perhaps, trying to make that decision as to, whether they should put themselves forward for a role that they might not feel completely qualified for, or kind of, jumping off into a next stage of life. If you've got one piece of advice for them, what would it be?
Don't disqualify yourself. The story I told here, I had disqualified myself and almost missed the biggest breakthrough of my career. And one of the reasons I want to tell my story is so that fewer people will choose to disqualify themselves. Just because you're scared does not mean you're not qualified. Everybody is scared. And so if you disqualify yourself, you take yourself out of the game. In the game, go for the thing. Let others disqualify you. I got plenty of no's along the way. We've talked about the yeses today, but I can tell you I got plenty of no's along the way. And every time someone else disqualified me, I learned something. And I took that so I could be better for the next time. So that would be my one piece of advice. It's okay to be scared. And please, please, please never be the one to disqualify yourself.
Is a brilliant piece of advice. Thank you so much, Patty. Thank you for being with me this afternoon, telling us some of your wonderful stories. And everybody should read the book. It's fantastic. And it's called, just to say it again, Why Is She Still Here? Such a good title. But luckily, very glad that you are here and glad that you've been with us today. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you, Lucy. This has been fantastic.
Thank you so much, Patty Azzarello, again, for sharing your life stories, reinventions, and the vulnerable moments behind your remarkable success story of leadership in what was traditionally a man's world, and how you forced yourself into rooms where you weren't expected to achieve what you wanted. Your book, Why Is She Still Here?, is a very entertaining read, full of insights and inspiration for men and women. I highly recommend it. For more inspiring reinvention stories, follow and subscribe now to the Phoenix Conversations on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, or maybe all three. You can connect with me on most social media platforms as long as you can spell my name. I am the only Lucy McCarraher on the internet, and I'd love to hear your reinvention story. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.